Welcome, eco advocates, and hello, Girl Scouts. Let's start and celebrate Endangered Species Day by protecting and learning about endangered species like a Girl Scout. Thank you for joining us virtually for our second Endangered Species Day virtual event celebrating the 16th anniversary of Endangered Species Day. Endangered Species Day is an opportunity to celebrate and learn about endangered species and how to protect them. It's a day to learn about plants and animals that are at risk to be endangered and protect their habitats. Let's take action like Girl Scouts. We can turn this patch program into a higher award opportunity. Hello, everyone. My name is Carrie, and I'm part of our council's program department. As a lifetime member of Girl Scouts and part of our council staff, I want to expose you to our environment and be a sister to every Girl Scouts. Before joining Girl Scouts, my career path was a fishery biologist, and I'm excited to share my passion with you today. With us on this webinar today is my colleague, Emily, who is helping us with chat. And of course, our guest speakers from NOAA, the Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. These organizations are in charge of protecting endangered species and their habitats. We are excited that both of these organizations are here today to share how they protect endangered species. Let's get started. So I have a few housekeeping requests we want to cover before getting started. First, only our guest speakers and I will be using the microphones and cameras today. We are on a Zoom webinar. If you have any questions, please type them in the question box below at the bottom of your window. Please only use the question box for on-topic questions during the webinar, as we want to answer all your questions. There will also be time at the end of our webinar to ask additional questions. So as we are all virtual, everyone's bandwidth is a little different. There will be some short videos to watch. If for some reason you can't see them, we will have placed the URL in the information handout you'll receive later. It's also a Google Docs, so you can watch them after the webinar or you can watch them again. Let's bring out the GIRL in Girl Scouts and look at completing this patch virtually and safely. We can complete step 4 of the Endangered Species Patch Program, and we will complete step 3 of the Cadet STEM Career Badge. I hope you all have already downloaded the Endangered Species Patch Program booklet. If not, the link will be added to the chat in our and it's on our Girl Scout website. It's going to be on the final slide of the webinar, and it'll be included in the info handout sheet that you'll receive later. All right, so we are all here to save endangered species and to learn about endangered species. When you've earned this patch, you'll have dived deep into the Endangered Species Act, from the history of the Endangered Species Act to taking action. With this webinar today, we are inspiring you to complete this patch. This patch program cannot be completed in an hour on a webinar, but I hope to help you get inspired and start your passion for protecting the environment. Okay, so NOAA and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife are two agencies that protect endangered species. Their mission statements are very similar, and we will learn how they protect species a little later. But first, let's get to know our leaders. We have 3 awesome researchers on the webinar today. I'm going to introduce you first to Colleen Coogan. Colleen is the Marine Mammal and Sea Turtle Branch Chief at NOAA's Greater Atlantic Regional Fisheries Office. Her degree is in biology. Her early jobs include field work, boats, planes, and beaches, and marine mammals and sea turtles from Greenland to Florida. She is a mom of 3, including 1 former Girl Scout and a former Boy Scout. When not working, you'll find her outside. And if she doesn't know already, once a Girl Scout, always a Girl Scout. Okay. Kim King Wren from U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Kim began her conservation career with the National Park Service. In 1997, she transferred to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Kim worked at Pea Island National Wildlife Refuge on the North Carolina coast as the visitor service manager at the MERRITT Island National Wildlife Refuge. Kim leads a team of visitors service specialists who welcome the refuge is nearly 2 million visitors each year. The VS system is responsible for all things people related, from the boat ramps to the guided bicycle tours, to the badge workshops for our scouts. And Michelle Atta has worked at the National Conservation Training Center for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for 8 years as a lab tech. She supports conservation instructions in courses such as motorboating, electrical fish techniques, stream restoration, fish culture, freshwater mussels, oil spill response, and river scuba diving. One of her highlights of her career was collecting candy darters from the wild for captive breeding program. She enjoys spending her time outside kayaking, biking, and traveling with her family to see animals such as turtles, starfish, manatees, and grizzly bears. Okay, so before we start the quick Ocean Today video, I wanted to mention that extinction is forever. That is why the Endangered Species Act is so important. The Endangered Species Act provides common sense, balanced solutions for government agencies, landowners, and concerned citizens to conserve endangered wildlife and their habitat. How does the Endangered Species Act protect endangered species? The Act includes 3 key elements: preventing listing species from being killed or harmed, protecting habitat essential for these species' survival, and creating plans to restore healthy populations. Okay, a listing a species is essential. Only after a species is listed does the species receive the critical benefit of the Act's protection. We are going to go over a quick review of some vocabulary. Threatened means a species is likely to become endangered within the foreseeable future. Endangered means a species is endangered of extinction throughout all or a significant portion of its range. And just like I said, extinction, there are no living individuals. So what is extinction? The answer is complicated. From locally extinct, functionally extinct, extinct in the wild, to extinct, gone forever. Sometimes these species are endangered even as they're discovered. Worldwide, they estimate that a dozen of new species go extinct every day. So let's watch the Ocean Today video and learn more about the ESA and how this act protects species.
What do elkhorn corals, leatherback sea turtles, and Hawaiian monk seals have in common? They are all protected under the U.S. Endangered Species Act. The Endangered Species Act of 1973 is one of the most effective conservation laws in the United States. Using science-based management plans, it has prevented the extinction of 99% of the species it protects. So how does it work? The U.S. Congress put the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in charge of land and freshwater species, and NOAA's National Marine Fisheries Service in charge of marine species. These agencies can review the status of a species on their own, or concerned citizens or groups can petition the agencies to list a species. After a thorough review process, a species can be classified as either endangered or threatened if necessary. Endangered means the species is in danger of extinction throughout all or a significant part of its range. Threatened means the species is likely to become endangered in the foreseeable future. If a species is listed as endangered, it is illegal to kill, harass, harm, or capture it without special permission. threatened species may be given many of the same protections. Once a species is listed, the agency in charge can designate the species' federally protected habitat. They'll also develop a recovery plan to guide government and private efforts to help the species and get it out of danger. Today, the Endangered Species Act protects over 2,140 listed species. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and NOAA continue to develop new technologies and management approaches to ensure the Endangered Species Act remains effective and that endangered species populations can rebound and their habitats can recover. A healthy ocean needs strong and sustainable populations of all marine species, and the Endangered Species Act has gone a long way to keeping it so.
Okay, girls, let's take a quick poll. We didn't do that. Okay. There we go.
Got it launched.
Perfect. So what percentage of endangered or threatened species listed have been saved by the conservational initiative resulting from the ESA? All right. I'm going to give you guys a few more seconds and put your response in now. I'm going to end the poll, share the results. So over the past 4+ decades, the Endangered Species Act has repeatedly demonstrated that when used to the full extent of the law, it works. The Act has been more than 99% successful at preventing extinction. Were it not for the Endangered Species Act, scientists have estimated at least 227 species would likely have gone extinct since the passage of the law. Okay. Okay. Eco advocates. As Girl Scouts, environmental stewardship has been a key part of the Girl Scout experience for over a century. What do we say when we start our meeting? We say the Girl Scout promise and the law to use resources wisely and to make the world a better place. Cadets, seniors, and ambassadors, do you want to protect wildlife, our environment, and make the world a better place? Let's go to our first guest speaker, Colleen from NOAA. Colleen. Oops, when you get a chance.
Good afternoon, everybody, and happy Endangered Species Day. And thanks for inviting me. As a mom of former Scouts, I'm a big fan. And as a woman in an environmental science job, I love talking to young women like you already working to make the world a better place, to help you see how you can perhaps do that for a career. As Carrie mentioned, I work with NOAA Fisheries, and NOAA is a part of National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration that takes care of marine animals and plants, and the habitats or homes that those animals and plants rely on. Next slide, please. Our Endangered Species Program is responsible for protecting 165 endangered and threatened populations, including those that spend their life in the oceans and some, like salmon and other anadromous species, that depend on the ocean for important life stages. 85 of the populations we protect are endangered and 80 are threatened, and they include all types of species, including plants, shellfish, corals, fish, sea turtles, and marine mammals. And with so many to protect, we developed a Species in the Spotlight program to help us focus time and resources on those populations that need the most help. Here are the 9 marine or anadromous species that are most endangered. And today I'm going to talk about the North Atlantic right whale, one of the most endangered whales in the world. Next slide, please. So like I said, right whales are one of the most endangered of the world's great whales. As this list of classifications shows you, they're mammals. So among the marine mammals that have the same qualities as land mammals, though unlike fish, that means that they breathe air, so they have to come to the surface to breathe periodically. They also have live babies that they nurse. They're warm-blooded and have hair, but unlike land mammals, most of them lose most of their hair while they're still in their mother's womb. So to stay warm, they have a thick layer of blubber. One of the really unique things about right whales is on the top of their heads, they have a rough patch of skin called callosity. And hitchhiking within those are small critters called whale lice that make the callosity white or pink in color. Each whale has a different pattern on their patch that lets us tell them apart. Being able to tell the whales apart has really let us learn a lot about how they live and travel, and let us estimate how many of them there are and how healthy they are. For example, we can know that an adult female has had calves every few years and then may appear with an injury and may not calve for a longer time than was usual. So we know that that injury affects her health. We can create and follow family trees and see how they use different habitats. And we can tell when some whales have disappeared and use that to estimate how many may have died. Next slide, please. Thank you. And by the way, the person who took this picture is on the webinar tonight, Allison Henry, one of our researchers at our Science Center. This is a picture of a fin whale on the top and two right whales down below. And you can see the fin whale, it looks thin. Right now, his mouth is open and he's got a mouthful of food and water. And so his neck is extended, but he's really a long, thin whale. And down below, you see those right whales, they're fat and robust. You can also see they're all feeding. So the fin whale has baleen plates instead of teeth. Most of the large whales, all but the sperm whale, are baleen whales instead of toothed whales. And this baleen is a material like your fingernails or your hair. It hangs from the roof of their mouth and it helps them to filter their food. So you can see the fin whale has short baleen, but the right whales down below, again, they're robust and they have very long plates of baleen hanging down that look almost like a comb in their mouth. You can also see their callosity pattern on this picture. These whales right now, they're feeding under the surface of the water. So you could consider that a boat wouldn't see them there. And that's one of the things that can make it kind of dangerous for them when boats are around. I wanted to show this picture because the reason these whales are endangered is because of whaling, really. I mean, they're still having some trouble, but their numbers got really low because of whaling. And what whalers wanted from them was the fat that they could render from that blubber layer that they have, and also those baleen plates that were called whalebone and that they used in the 1800s and into the early 1900s because they didn't have plastic yet. Next slide, please. This map shows where right whales live. The peach-colored areas are where we thought they spent most of their time. A lot of them will go down to the southeast US in the shallow, warm, and protected areas. That's where the mothers have their babies, where they can protect them in those warm, protected areas. The babies don't have a big blubber layer, so they need that warmer water. And then we used to think that most of the right whales would come up to that area up in the northeast US. That's called the Gulf of Maine. That peach area kind of looks like a face with a nose sticking out into the darker blue area. And that's where we thought that was really important habitat for them to feed in the spring and the summer on copepods and other small critters. And then about 2010, 2011, we stopped seeing the whales in their usual places. Not as many were going to the southeast, and not as many were showing up where we were looking for them in the Gulf of Maine. And we found out in the mid-2010s, around 2015, that a lot of the whales were instead following that path of that arrow and heading up to the Gulf of St. Lawrence in Canada. That is an area where we know we periodically saw some whales, a handful of whales were there in the summers, but now it appeared that a big part of the population was going up there. And this is important because one of the ways we protect right whales is by knowing where they hang out, where they aggregate. That's where we put the measures in place to protect them. And in Canada, because we never had seen a lot of them up there, the Canadians didn't have measures in place to protect them. Starting around 2017, we were realizing that the mortalities of these whales were going up, and we declared something called an unusual mortality event. In the next slide, this shows what was happening to that population. Can you click it one more time? I think that there's an animation I didn't intend to leave in there. The dots on this slide show us how we track the population, the estimated numbers of the population over time. And while they were as low as 260 in the 1990s, they got up to about 481 whales in 2011. And then you can see that that curve levels off and starts bouncing around, and it takes a deep turn sometime in the mid-20 teens, probably around 2015. And that curve got much steeper in 2017. So 2017 was when we realized we needed to start looking in Canada, and we found 17 dead whales that year, 12 of them in Canadian waters and 5 of them in US waters. And where we could tell what caused the death, it was entanglements in fishing lines, in buoy lines on fishing traps, and also boat strikes that were the cause. So since 2017, we've been tracking them even more closely. And since that time, we have observed 49 that were dead or seriously injured. And when a whale is seriously injured, that means that we think it's probably going to die from its injury. 9 of those were killed, and 13 were seriously injured by getting entangled in these buoy lines. 11 were killed, and 2 were injured by getting struck by boats. 5 other whales were rescued from an entanglement. They were disentangled by a disentanglement team, but those would have died if not for that intervention. So for the rest of this talk, I'm going to be talking to you about entanglement, the entanglement issue. I won't be talking much about the vessel strike issue. Next slide, please.
So Colleen, before you can go on, can you go through and tell us exactly what the line means, as those are about 481 North Atlantic right whales in 2011, is that correct?
Right, so in 2011, there were an estimated 481 North Atlantic right whales alive, and now that number is down to less than 370 is the current estimate.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
Ready
So
for me
if
to
you could
start
play
the
that video. This is a disentanglement team. They're disentangling, they're attempting to disentangle a right whale down off of the southeast US. This whale was all the way down off of, I think, Georgia, but they found out the gear on it came all the way from Canada. One of the big problems in trying to address this problem is that we don't see the entanglement where it happens, and we can't always tell where it happens. So it's hard for us to know where to target our efforts. The whales can drag, the right whales are actually very, very strong, and they can drag this gear a long way. I want you to see how the people on this boat, the small boat, this is pretty dangerous. This whale could launch that boat. The boat and the people in it probably weigh about 3,000 pounds, and that whale has a force of about 8,000 pounds. So each tail thrust could send that boat flying if they're not careful. So they have to communicate really well with each other the whole time. They're probably also communicating with people who are up on a plane, and the people on the plane can see what the whale's doing under the water and help instruct them. And they're using specialized gear, including a hook that on the inside has a knife that can help cut the whale. So here he's getting that hook attached. They'll let that buoy provide some drag, and they'll let the whale do some of the work. And now I think they're going to give a little pull on that line. They have to make sure they get that hook in the right place in the entanglement. You guys probably know knots, and you know that if you pull a knot the wrong place, you're just making it tighter. So they need to cut that rope at the right place to let it release the whale. And in this case, they were successfully able to do that. It's not always possible. It helped that that was a calm day and that entanglement was seen close to shore. But as I said, that whale had that entanglement for a while before they were able to do this. Next slide. So it's complicated. What we know is that whales are becoming entangled. 80 to 85% of all the right whales have scars from entanglements that show that they've been entangled at least once. We think about 20% of the population encounters lines every year and gets a new scar. Entanglements can just scar the animal. They get off. We don't know how that happens, or they can lead to serious injury or death. And as I said, a lot of the whales in recent years have been dying from this. Whales can travel a long way with the gear attached, like that whale. And trap pot and gillnet gear, this is gear that's often set on the bottom, but there's a buoy line that has a buoy on the surface so the fishermen can pull their gear up, and so other fishermen can see the gear. And those lines appear to be one of the biggest problems for these whales. That line can get caught. If you look at this image here, that whale's got line wrapped around its mouth. Mouth entanglements are really complicated. It can get caught in the baleen, but it can also get caught and wrap around other body parts. And what we don't know is really important. We don't know where most of these entanglements occur, at least not exact sites. We don't necessarily know which fishery they're occurring in. We don't know how the whales got entangled, what they do when they hit the line that causes that entanglement to happen. And we don't know if whales can see the gear. We've seen some images of whales, they appear to be looking at it and their eyes are on the side of their head and looking on it, spinning on it. And that might be one of the things that causes the entanglement. We just don't know. So a lot that we don't know. Next slide, please. So what do we need to know? We need a lot of help with this. So we get together with a lot of stakeholders that have all kinds of different expertise. And it's really important for us to start out by giving these stakeholders a lot of information. If people only talk to people who are like them, they can often get the wrong information. They don't have all the right information. They don't know where to go to get that. So we have people from the fishing industry, we have environmental organizations, we have scientists that join us, as well as state and federal fishery managers that can help us do something about it. And all together for this big problem, for these big whales, we have a big team of 61 stakeholders that get together regularly to try and solve this problem. Next slide, please. What are the options that we have? In order to figure that out, we really need to know a lot about where the fishing gear is. And believe it or not, we don't always know even that, and where the whales are at different times of year. And then we really need to think about what's happening and how we can reduce the interactions. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about what we've done so far. Maybe the most obvious thing, and it seems like it's been pretty effective, is when we know where the whales are, we put in seasonal restricted areas. We close that area to fishing, so we separate the whales and the gear. And this was the reason that was so difficult when they went up to the Gulf of St. Lawrence first, because there were no protected areas up there, and the whales and the fishing gear were right on top of each other. We've done things to have less rope in the water. One thing is we make the rope, these are traps in this picture below. They're traps, they're usually attached along the bottom with rope in between them. And that rope was floating into the water column, and now all that rope has to sit on the bottom, which fishermen didn't love because it can get caught in rocks and get snagged and make it hard for them to retrieve it. We've also required the rope to be weakened or put weak inserts in them so that if the whale gets to the line, it can break that line before it gets seriously injured. And then we are requiring fishermen to mark the ropes so that when we do find gear and take gear off of whales, we can maybe learn a little bit more about where that interaction happened and know about what we can do about it. This picture down below shows ropeless fishing work that's being done now. It's sort of a cartoon of it. And when we say ropeless fishing, it's not really ropeless. There's still rope between those pots. And there's also rope that gets stored on the bottom. The trap all the way on the left shows that buoy rope going up to the surface. But those other three sets of traps have other things stored on the bottom that get released by the boat when it comes up to the gear. So the boat is on site, releases that buoy or whatever flotation device pulls it to the surface, and then the fisherman can pull his gear up, reset the device, and reset that fishing gear. So there's a lot of hope in this. A lot of work is being done right now, and we're hoping that this is going to ultimately allow fishermen and whales to thrive right side by side. Right now, there are still some things we need to figure out. It doesn't always hold up to the operations. It's really rough work, and sometimes things get broken. And also, enforcement agents can't see the gear, so they can't make sure it's being fished legally, and other fishermen can't see it. So sometimes they'll be setting gear on top of each other, which causes a problem for the fishermen getting their gear back. We don't want more ghost gear out there. So I believe that's all I had to share. There are solutions out there, and some of you guys might be the change makers that help us solve this problem in the future.
Sounds great, Colleen. I have one question. So how do researchers identify North Atlantic right whales that are actually entangled?
That's a really good question, and it's not always easy. We do monitor these whales. Allison Henry, who's one of my colleagues who's watching today, we monitor these whales with aerial surveys. So frequently, those surveys happen where the whales are aggregating. So there are a lot of whales there, and frequently they'll detect an entanglement from the air. We also get calls from vessel operators on the water that see them. And so it's pretty much opportunistic. Someone will report it. And if it's in the right location and we have a disentanglement team that can get out there and the weather allows, we can send out the disentanglement team.
Sounds great. Thank you, Colleen, for such an insightful webinar and helping to protect these amazing species. We've been informed on how NOAA is helping recover this endangered North Atlantic right whale and how important it is to know about the population size. Let's meet our Fish and Wildlife Service guests and how they protect endangered species. Hi, Kim. Oop.
Had to unmute. Hi, Girl Scouts. Happy Endangered Species Day. Can you see me? Yeah? Okay. So I'm Kim King Wren, and I'm a park ranger at the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge, and I'm a lifetime Girl Scout. When I was a little kid, I liked to play outside, and I knew that I wanted to help animals. So at first I thought about becoming a veterinarian, which I know a lot of people think about when they care about animals, but I chose to become a park ranger instead because I specifically wanted to help endangered species. And so now I work at the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge, which you'll see on the next slide is located in Florida. So here at Merritt Island Refuge, we have 17 different types of animals that are listed as either endangered or threatened by the endangered species list. And the reason that we have so many is because of our location. We're on the Atlantic coast of Florida, but more importantly, we're at a place on the globe where species from the south in the tropics can survive. This is as far north as a lot of tropical species can survive, but also species from the north called the temperate zone can also survive. So this is as far south as the northern species can go. So because we have the northern species and the southern species coming together right here, we have an incredible amount of diversity of species. And a lot of them are living at the edge of their suitable habitat. So that's why a lot of them are endangered here on the refuge. So today I want to share with you the stories of two of those species. And on the next slide, you'll meet the eastern indigo snake. So the eastern indigo snake is a threatened species, and it's a really beautiful snake, and it's also a really docile snake. You can see the color picture is one of our staffers holding a snake, and then there's kind of this vintage Florida postcard in the other one showing some tourists holding a really giant snake. And indigos are a really big snake, and they're known for having a beautiful, shiny blue-black color, and also for being super docile. And so it makes them really popular as pets. And so many of them were collected out of the wild and sold into the pet trade that there were not enough left to keep the population going. So here at Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge, we manage habitat for the indigo snake. We have them living here in the wild. But nearby the refuge is the Eubalaena National Fish Hatchery, and they also work to help recover the snake. And Ranger Jamie Sheeler recently visited the hatchery, and up next we have a short video. She has the story of how the hatchery people helped the snake.
We are here at the Eubalaena National Fish Hatchery in Eubalaena, Florida. In partnership with the Eubalaena Center for Indigo Conservation, the eastern indigo snake is raised here to later be released into its natural environment. As of today, 62 eastern indigo snakes have been released back into the wild, and on May 26, 11 more will be released. There are 2 recovery sites in which the snakes are released: the Apalachicola Bluffs and Ravines Preserve and the Conecuh National Forest in Alabama. Here is Tony Brady. He is the Deputy Project Leader at Eubalaena National Fish Hatchery. He's going to tell us a little bit more about how the snakes are raised.
You are here in our Eastern Indigo Recovery Room. In this room, eastern indigo snakes to be released in the wild to recover this federally threatened species. Here you'll see we have bins with snakes in them. And one of the things that we do here is we make sure everything has a label so we don't get anything mixed up. We're concerned about snakes passing on a gut parasite called Cryptosporidium. And to help prevent that, we have a 2-bin system. So this one snake will only ever be in these 2 bins while they're here at the hatchery. That way it prevents them from cross-contaminating with other bins from other snakes. The snakes, while they're here, are fed a diet of mice, quail chicks, and sometimes we have rainbow trout that we froze, and then the snakes will eat those. We'll thaw them out, warm them up, and then we'll feed them to the snakes. They get fed about twice a week, and water's changed every day. So when we get ready, we'll hold these snakes for about 10 months. So we'll get them kind of early summer, and by spring of the following year, they'll be ready to be released. We try to grow them up to where they're over 700 grams in weight. Most of the times they're well over 1,000 grams when they leave here. And when we transport them, we actually put them in pillowcases, tie them out in a pillowcase and put that in an aerated plastic bin, put that in our vehicles and drive them to the release location. So when we get to the release locations, we take the pillowcases out to the site and we actually release all these snakes in gopher tortoise burrows. In the northern range where these snakes are being released, they actually use gopher tortoise burrows as a cold weather refugia. So when the temperatures drop and you have to put a coat on, these snakes go into these gopher tortoise burrows where it's a little bit warmer and it helps them survive the colder weather.
Here you see an eastern indigo snake enjoying its lunch. Thanks to the Eubalaena National Fish Hatchery and similar U.S. Fish and Wildlife efforts, the eastern indigo snake is on its way to recovery.
So on the next slide, we're going to see another protected species, and that's the Florida manatee. Manatees also live here at the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge. You may have heard about them. They've been in the news a little bit lately. Merritt Island is one of 27 national wildlife refuges in Florida that are home to the manatees. In recent years, the manatee populations have been increasing thanks to the help of Florida residents. Their numbers climbed to over 6,000, which was enough to have them upgraded from endangered to threatened in 2017. So they're actually on the road to recovery. That was really a step in the right direction when they get upgraded to just threatened. However, the manatees that live in the Indian River Lagoon, which is here directly, it's what separates Merritt Island from the mainland, is the Indian River Lagoon. About a third of all the manatees live there, and they have been facing a new challenge, especially this winter. And on the next slide, we've got Ranger Jamie again with a video explaining what's going on with the manatees.
This is the Indian River Lagoon, a 156-mile-long estuary where freshwater meets saltwater from the Atlantic Ocean, creating a mixture called brackish water. There are 3 components that make up the Indian River Lagoon system: the Indian River, the Banana River, and the Mosquito Lagoon. This lagoon is an economic powerhouse, generating $3.7 billion to Florida annually, much of the revenue coming from the fishing sector. Several species call the Indian River Lagoon home: 685 fish species, 370 bird species, 2,100 plant species, and 2,200 animal species, including the threatened West Indian manatee. Manatees call the Indian River Lagoon home during the summer months when the water is warm enough for them to inhabit. Unfortunately, there has been a dramatic decrease in manatees this year due to threats facing the lagoon. Let's explore some of these threats. One of the biggest threats that are facing manatees is the loss of seagrass within the Indian River Lagoon system due to polluted waters. You see, seagrass needs a lot of light to be able to grow. So when the water gets polluted, it becomes dark and the light can't reach the bottom of the lagoon where the seagrass grows. This means that the seagrass dies, it doesn't grow, and then the manatees don't have any food to eat. We are here at one of the spoil islands off of the Indian River Lagoon. Here on the islands are where the water is the clearest. You can see here that the water is pretty clear. This manatee footage was taken at Crystal River, not within the Indian River Lagoon system. This water clarity is what manatees need in order to thrive in their environments. As of 2019, there were an estimated 6,300 manatees in Florida. Unfortunately, due to the loss of seagrass, only a handful of manatees have been spotted within the Indian River Lagoon system so far this year, and it is still unknown how much the seagrass crisis will affect the manatee population. Luckily, experts are working to finding a solution to this crisis, including U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service biologists and Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission biologists. The number one cause of death and injury for manatees within the United States are water vehicle collisions. Because of this, there are signs like the slow speed sign to tell boaters that they need to slow down their boats in certain designated areas. Luckily for the manatees, there are plenty of people who are working together to clean up the Indian River Lagoon that the manatees call home. Anyone can help by not using lawn fertilizers during the summer and disposing of yard waste properly, two of the reasons why the lagoon is polluted. But working together, we all can get the manatee back on the road to recovery.
That last bit of video is from the Moat Marine Aquarium. That captive manatee weighs about 1,800 pounds. It's huge. It's one of the biggest ones we've ever seen. So you see on the next slide that there are 3 steps to endangered species recovery. Listing a species as endangered, upgrading to threatened, and then recovery for delisting. The Endangered Species Act is one of the most powerful conservation laws that we have here in the United States. And it's also a very successful law. Many species have made the transition from endangered to threatened to fully recovered and delisted. So up next, you'll hear from Michelle Aitha with the story of the recovery of the bald eagle.
Thanks for having me, and happy Endangered Species Day. So I'm gonna talk about the delisted species that we have. And as we've heard today, that in the Endangered Species Act is really successful, 99% successful. So you don't get much better than that. And so it was interesting because just in March, the Fish and Wildlife Service tweeted that in 1963, there were only 417 nesting pairs of bald eagle in the lower 48 states. And today there's more than 71,400 nesting pairs. So that is such a great number, and they have recovered so drastically that they were delisted. So they're soaring to new heights, and we love ending on a high note. And this eagle is the symbol for our nation and the symbol for endangered species and how it can be successful. As we look at the next slide, they are now flying, and probably most of you have seen bald eagles. I know when I was growing up, I didn't see a bald eagle. And that's because that was, say 40 years ago. And they really started to go downhill about 60 years ago. And so if we go to the next slide, you'll say, well, why? What happened with them? Well, as we heard with the manatees, and there's effects of chemicals with them, there's also these effects with the bald eagle. DDT was primarily used for mosquito control. And so it's a chemical that was applied, and it was successful with killing the mosquitoes. But the problem with chemicals is they linger in the environment, and you may not see the effects right away. So if you think about, say if somebody comes to treat for ants or some small pests in your house, you might see them dying in their carcasses and all that. And you think, oh, okay, no big deal. It's just affecting them. But what we don't realize is it's building up into, and it takes a little while for it to be seen. So, I always say, well, if it's killing them, it's probably also having a detrimental effect on us as well. And, it takes time, and it takes science, and it takes research to figure these things out. As we know from the pandemic, when we just started this pandemic, it was like we didn't know much. So we had to give it time. We had to let the scientists research it and study it. So they found out that DDT was thinning the eggshells. And so the nice thing is that in 1973, I think we'll go to the next slide. In 1973, not only was the Endangered Species Act started, but they also banned DDT. So that was very helpful for the eagles, because what it did was it thinned their eggshells. So when the eagles would sit on them, they would crush. So they also passed in the 70s the Clean Air and Water Act, which are still in existence today. And boy, am I grateful, because I live close to the river and I like seeing clean water that I can see through, that's not polluted. So we need to make sure that we keep, after our legislators, and we want to keep clean air and clean water, because in some countries, I don't know if you all remember the Olympics several years ago, when they were in a nation and everybody was wearing masks because they had polluted air. And so, that's an everyday problem for them. But in this country, thank God, we have the Clean Air and the Clean Water Act. I like breathing clean air, and I like the clean water. So that really helped the bald eagle in 1973. In 1995, their status was changed from endangered to threatened. And in 2007, they were delisted. So it took time. That was about 34 years of legislation and cooperation. Now, if we go to the next slide, we're going to see, this is where I work. I work at the National Conservation Training Center, and that's located in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. So it's about 70 miles northwest of Washington, D.C. And we have 534 acres. And if we go to the next slide, and if you look at my background, that's my background. That is the bald eagle's nest. And I like to call this a full circle moment. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service protected the bald eagles. And what did they do? They flew to our campus and they built a nest. And so I just love this story, and the good thing is too, it's somewhere where most of us workers and all the visitors can actually see it. And so when this first happened, it was 2004 was when they first built the nest. And then somebody had a great idea. And in 2005, there was the Eagle Cam that was installed. And it's a partnership between the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Outdoor Channel. And so they have had this bald eagle cam installed since 2005. And it is a huge hit. So I'd really encourage you. I think they just put it in the chat to go and check that out. And if we take a look at the next slide, when they are grown, make the size of a fist. I'm sorry, when they're born, if you make the a fist with your hand, that's the size of a bald eagle when they're born. And in 3 short months, they grow to be full size. Now, another cool thing that makes it easy for you to remember about the bald eagles is when they start nesting, they'll collect, sticks and grasses and all the kinds of things for their nest, which they, freshen up every year and bring more sticks to every year. And the awesome thing, now this is in our area, it depends upon what part of the country you're in, but they lay their eggs around Valentine's Day and they hatch around St. Patrick's Day. So that makes it pretty easy to remember. And so it's pretty amazing to be able to watch something grow from a baby, to their full growth in just 3 short months, and the cam's on that whole time. So I just think that that is really amazing. And if we go to the next slide, this is just how you can be part of the solution. As we heard, don't buy or apply chemicals because they linger in the environment, and a chemical had a direct impact on this bird as chemicals do on all living things. And also, my biggest thing is I usually always have a reusable water bottle because, bottled water, it's expensive. They have to transport it. Then you have a plastic container from it. So that's a little simple thing that you can do. And when you learn, like you did today, teach. So maybe talk to your parents if they're applying chemicals and things like that on the yard. I know people say, oh, dandelions, we don't like them. I kind of think they're nice looking. They're a yellow flower. They make the lawn look good. So I'll see people out there applying their pesticides, and maybe you can talk to them and tell them what you learned. So, and if we go to the next slide, we're gonna take it back to Carrie here. So thanks again, everybody. And remember, bald eagles are a huge success story, not only with our nation's symbol, but a symbol for success of how the endangered species can work. Thank you.
That's great, Michelle and Kim. I have one quick question. Do the eastern indigo snakes, what do they eat in the wild? Because they don't eat the gophers. They just use their holes as habitat.
Yeah, that's a great question. Other animals do live in, it's a gopher tortoise hole that they live in.
Okay.
And other animals do come and live in that hole too, because it's cool and shady. And the snakes will eat any mice that go in there to hide in the shade, or crickets, or frogs, or any kind of small animal, whether it's another reptile like a lizard or a small mammal like certain kinds of mice. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Thank you, Michelle and Kim, for such an insightful look on both the indigo snake, the manatee, and of course, the bald eagle. We have been informed on how U.S. Fish and Wildlife is helping recover these great endangered species. We're running a little short on time, so I'm going to quickly go over a couple things. So what are alternative facts? What's next and how, here's your opportunity to take everything you've learned and enjoyed and put it into action. But first I want to talk about slant articles. This is a type of writing that conforms to a particular bias or a certain audience. Today we listen to 2 agencies about how they protect endangered species. So where would you go to find facts about the endangered species? I know where I would go. I would go directly to the NOAA website or the United States Fish and Wildlife to look and see. So definitely go ahead and search the Endangered Species Act, see what information pops up. Let's live by the Girl Scout law. So real quick, facts and falsehoods and different points of view. So we can be influenced by media outlets. Who is credible? Do you believe everything you read? Is it accurate or exaggerated? Make sure you're using the most credible source. Check out numerous websites and news articles. And now we know where to go for these endangered species information and facts. So today, what is next? So how to complete the Endangered Species Patch Program. Well, as I said at the beginning of the webinar, we did complete step 4. So our experience is completed because we have these awesome guest speakers that came and talked about, that gave us an experience. Okay, so definitely check out the handbook for, check out our booklet for how to actually complete the patch. I wanted to share this with you guys. The Endangered Species Patch has meaning, as every species is important as they circle around the planet. So I created and designed the artwork in this patch and drew each of the illustrations to share and highlight the endangered species. Did you know all the illustrations on the patch are endangered species and are listed on page 5 of our patch program and booklet? Take a look, see if you can find them throughout the booklet. I hope you've enjoyed our council's second virtual endangered species webinar while enlightening you to complete the patch program and learning about how endangered species are protected. Think globally, act locally. So make a pledge like Michelle was talking about to refuse single use, commit to a 30-day reduce single-use plastic, paper, and other disposable items you might use. Girls, you are the solution. So don't forget to complete the rest of the patch, and we will have time for questions in a minute. I want to thank both Colleen, Kim, Michelle in sharing their careers and enlightening on us on how to protect endangered species. Maybe becoming a research scientist for NOAA or the Fish and Wildlife is in your future, protecting our environment and endangered species. I'm going to put a quick plug in. Did you guys know that June 17th is part of Sea Turtle Week? So join us, join us and NOAA again for a great webinar as we learn about leatherback sea turtles and complete a few more steps in the Endangered Species Patch Program. So make every day endangered species. So definitely we'll put the, please complete our survey. We love to know what you guys think about our webinars and how we can proceed. So definitely complete our Survey Monkey, and I will open it up to if you guys have any questions for our panelists, Colleen, Michelle, or Kim, and we'll look in the questions and answers right now.
Okay, I see a question here. How many species have become extinct because of human actions? Do we have like an estimate?
So girls, that is part of the Endangered Species Patch Program, to look up delisted species. It's also to look up 2 different laws. So we have the Marine Mammal Protection Act, that would be something to look up. And there are other acts that protect endangered species that go along with the Endangered Species Act. So please download the booklet and check out the Endangered Species Act. Oops. Let's see. Emily, did you put the survey in the chat?
I put the Survey Monkey link in the chat.
Perfect.
I'll put it again. You'll also be sent this by email.
Perfect, girls. Let's see. We will just let you, anyone who attended today's webinar, I will cordially invite you with a registration link for our Sea Turtle webinar. So Michelle, I saw a question that says, where are all the bald eagles mostly located?
That's a great question. They're really throughout the United States, and there's a lot in Alaska. That's why that figure didn't include those, it was the lower 48. Alaska's always had a really strong population, but you have to think about their habitat and what they like. And they need, a lot of them locate near water because they eat a lot of fish. The interesting thing is that nest is 100 feet up. How do they get water to that nest? Not easily. That's kind of why they primarily eat fish in the beginning when they're first born in those first 3 months. That's their primary water source, but they're located throughout the US. And like I said, I would say their habitat is, you're not going to find them in cities, but you will find them in the rural areas and along waterways for sure.
Interesting. Kim, do the gopher tortoises just let the indigo snakes share the hole, or are these old holes that they inhabit?
Yeah, that's a great question. The gopher tortoise burrow is huge. It can be like 40 feet long and go down 6 feet underground. And they can have all different kinds of animals living in there. They don't care, they share. The snakes, mice, frogs, everything. Other animals come in and build little side burrows off of it, and the tortoises don't care. The tortoises eat plants and they're protected by their shells. So they're fine with sharing with other animals.
Sounds great. To continue the STEM question before you ladies go, Colleen, was there something that enlightened you to become a marine mammal biologist, sea turtle biologist?
So yeah, I grew up in the New York City area in a really large family, and all we could afford to do on the weekends was to drive to the beach 10 miles away, and we would spend the days on the beach on the weekends when my father was off. And I had no idea there were whales living in the waters right off of Long Island, or sea turtles. I found out in my first job, and I was so amazed that these giant animals lived right in the area that I loved and wanted to protect, that I then started just looking for whatever work I could do to get in the field and study them.
Kim, would you like to share? Was there something that got you shared a little bit, but was there something that got you very interested in working with wildlife?
The opposite of Colleen, in that I lived in the country and I lived on a farm, and my parents, especially my mom, would always say, go outside and play. So I just spent tons of time outside, and I was just always interested in nature and wildlife. So I was a fortunate person who kind of knew all along that I was headed to do something with animals even before I got to college.
Sounds great. Michelle?
So I didn't have a lot of experience in the outdoors growing up, but the ones I did have, I thoroughly enjoyed. And I've always been passionate about the environment and making wise decisions. And I did a presentation for Earth Day, and sometimes you girls think that you don't have much power, but you do. What you purchase every day, you basically vote with your dollars, so you're voting. So I was always very passionate about that. And the things just melded for me. I wasn't in this field to begin with, but I've volunteered later in life, and that gave me the opportunity at the National Conservation Training Center. I was helping with managing the grounds, and then the position in the lab came open, and so it's just a nice marrying of my love for animals and the environment.
That's great, ladies. Let's see. Girls, I see a lot of questions that are actually part of our Endangered Species Patch program. So I hope that you girls will open it up and look up the answer for yourself. We both know where we should go for accurate endangered species information. That would be NOAA.org, and it would be fishandwildlife.org. No, it's .gov. I'm sorry. NOAA.gov and USFishandWildlife.gov. Those are the two places that we can look up and find accurate information, because I see one that says how are animals tracked and documented once listed. That's step one of our endangered species patch program. So please open up the book and get started. It looks like I don't see
Hey, Carrie,
really any.
Carrie,
Mhm.
I saw one question flash by about the snake. And they were asking how it got to be extinct. It's not extinct, it's just endangered. And it was from the pet trade because people would catch them out of the wild and sell them as pets. And then most pet owners are not breeders. They don't breed the snakes. So like Michelle said, you know, this is something where girls have power. If you want a pet, think about what pet you're buying. You know, is it an exotic pet? And if it is an exotic pet, where did it come from? You know, was it bred or in captivity, or was it captured from the wild? So you can actually help a lot of different species by what kind of pet you choose.
In light of that, Kim, do you have a favorite endangered species that you would like to share with us?
Favorite endangered species? Manatees are so cute. I love manatees. They have cute little faces.
Michelle, do you have an endangered species that you would like to share? I see a question, that's why I'm asking.
I would have to say the candy darter, because recently in 2018, I was part of a collaboration with some other agencies, and we went out and collected the population, the first initial population, and for captive breeding. But what we first do initially is we do a genetic assessment, and we analyze them because they're hybridizing, and they're just a beautiful fish. They look like a rainbow. They're only in West Virginia and Virginia, so, you know, kind of close to home. That would be my favorite endangered species, and one people probably don't know about.
Colleen?
It's hard for me to pick. I'd like to say the Kemp's Release sea turtle because it's almost a success story. It was almost extinct when I started working on it, and now it's doing fairly well. But I'm so amazed by leatherback sea turtles. I'm excited you've got a leatherback presentation coming up because they weigh over a ton or up to a ton, and they get there by eating jellyfish in the middle of the ocean. And to imagine that something that eats jellyfish can get so big. And I just think they're beautiful. When I've seen them in the wild, they're amazing. So I would say leatherback sea turtle.
Let's see, one more question. How can you tell if a pet was bred in the wild? Is there a certification to look for? I mean, my opinion is we really shouldn't be purchasing red-eared sliders, or I don't know. Kim, do you have any knowledge on how we should go about buying pets, if we should even buy them?
So, you know, some breeders who sell to pet stores also are helping keep this species alive, you know. So a reputable pet shop will be able to tell you the source of where they got their animals from. So they'll be able to give you the name of the breeder, where if you're buying something like a bearded dragon or something like that, they should be able to tell you where they got it from. And if they're hesitant when you ask that question, then you should probably pick a different shop, right? Or if you're not looking for an exotic animal, go to a shelter, you know.
All right, ladies. Well, one more plug. Girls, if you're interested in the Sea Turtle workshop webinar that we're going to have in June, I will cordially invite you and send everyone on the webinar a link. Registration is not open yet. It will open a little later. And again, I hope you guys open up the Endangered Species Patch Program and earn the patch and become more knowledgeable about endangered species. I got to say, happy Endangered Species Day. I am glad you guys were here to learn about the North Atlantic right whale, the indigo snake, and the bald eagle. And I have to thank Colleen, Kim, and Michelle again. Thank you guys for spending and sharing all your knowledge with us and enlightening Girl Scouts. Thank you.